Hi, I'm Konrad Marshall, and from the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, welcome to Good Weekend Talks, a magazine for your ears featuring in-depth conversations with fascinating people from sport and politics, science and culture, business and beyond. Every week you can download new episodes in which top journalists from across our newsrooms talk to compelling people about the definitive stories of the day. In this episode, we speak with Jane Flemming. Flemming made her name in the late 80s and early 90s as a golden girl in track and field, a two-time Olympian and Commonwealth Games gold medalist, competing in the heptathlon, as well as being an adept sprinter, hurdler and long jumper. She retired before the Sydney Games, however, transitioning to a career in media, marketing and management, and 18 months ago she took on a different role altogether as President of Athletics Australia. It's an exciting time to be in the role too, with a host of mid-career champions like Nina Kennedy, Jessica Hull and Matt Denny, not to mention junior stars on the rise like Torrie Lewis, Claudia Hollingsworth, Cameron Myers, and of course, Gout Gout. She joins us in the studio at The Age today to talk about all that and more. Welcome, Jane.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a real privilege. Let's start at the beginning, shall we? So you were born in Horsham, so I was going to ask you about life out in that regional town, but then I believe you kind of grew up on the eastern edge of Melbourne around Belgrave.
Yeah.
So what was it? What was your movement?
Well, so I was born in Horsham, but we were only there for 6 months.
Okay.
And then moved to a place called the Dookie Agricultural College,
Right.
which is halfway between Shepparton and Benalla, and it's a tertiary campus, and we lived on the campus. So
Right.
I'm one of 5 children. And my dad worked for the Victorian Agricultural Department. And so it was, I have to say, a brilliant way to spend the first 8 years of my life and my siblings. We had the run of the college. There was a swimming pool opposite us. There were tennis courts. We were in the country. I recall going to the poultry on the farm on the college to pick eggs up, and we'd pick them up in a bucket and walk home with them, swinging that bucket around, keeping the eggs in there with centrifugal force, and taking a cane clothing basket down to a field of corn that was going to be ploughed up the next day. So we all picked the corn and brought it home in the basket before that field was ploughed. So we had a really brilliant early childhood. There were only 42 pupils at our school.
Man.
And there was the big school and the little school. And actually it was quite formative for me, even in terms of my introduction to athletics in a way.
How so?
Yeah, because I went to, my mother dressed my older brother and sister and I up, this shows how old I am actually, in the white terry toweling shorts with a white T-shirt and a pair of Dunlop volleys, and drove us the 26 miles it was at that time to the Shepparton and District Primary School Athletics Carnival when I was 7 years old, and I came home with a chest of blue ribbons for all sorts of exciting things like the egg and spoon race and the 3-legged race, but I also won, and I think I may have broken the record for the 40-yard sprint.
Amazing.
So that was me until I was 8, and then we moved to the Big Smoke. We moved down to Melbourne and lived in a place called Ferntree Gully, and then sort of in my sort of early to mid-teens we moved up to Monbulk in the Dandenongs.
Yep.
And then I went to school in Belgrave. Yeah.
Hilly country out there.
It is. You didn't want to go for a jog. I don't like turning bends or going around corners when I run. That's way too far. And there was a lot of that in Monbulk. But, again, I think it was a great place to kind of spend some time because it's beautiful, as most people know here in the Dandenongs if you're in Melbourne. But I used to say to Dad, when I'm old enough, I'm going to live in Collins Street, because the commutes that I used to have to do to go to sport and to university were beyond. And partly what drove me to move to the Institute of Sport in Canberra, actually, at the age of 20. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you eventually made your name, of course, as we said earlier, as a hurdler, sprinter, heptathlete, just all-round gun athlete. I'm always curious to know how people land on certain events in aths. Is it this process of elimination where you try them all and figure out that you're good at this, or is it to do with what you like? Like, do you choose the event or do the events choose you?
So when we moved to Melbourne, there was, I had honestly the 6-month period in my life that was, I think, engendered my love of athletics. So the first thing that happened was that carnival I just spoke to you about. And I've often thought back, and I think with everyone that's really successful, there is a moment in your life where you go, that's what I'm going to do. So whether it's, you know, a US president or whether it's an artist or somebody finds their thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the first thing. And then when we moved to Melbourne and went to this primary school of 600 pupils, they had sports houses.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what they were.
Right.
You know, I was 8 years old, but they were called Elliott, Clark, Landy and Dubell.
Mm.
So named after 4 famous Australian, unbelievably successful track and field runners.
Yep, from a golden age.
Yes, they were. And, you know, I now look back, I ran for the Landy House, and John Landy and Marjorie Jackson, my 2 all-time heroes, not so much because of what they did for athletics, but because when I met them and when you've had some success and you meet a lot of other successful people, they're quite disappointing as humans.
Sure, never meet your heroes.
Yeah, but they were even greater people, and they are, Marge is still alive, greater people than they were athletes. So I'm so pleased that I ran for the Landy House. So that was one thing. And then my first really, I guess, friend that I made did a thing called Little Athletics.
Yeah, okay.
And I had no idea, like we were so naive coming from the country. And I went home and said to Mum and Dad, can I go to this thing called Little Athletics on a Saturday morning? And they actually said no.
Ooh.
So because we used to have to go to religious instruction classes on a Saturday morning.
Yep.
And then they got changed to a Thursday. And I often joke that, you know, I wasn't given this talent for no reason. Kismet kind of came to it. And then I did Little Athletics. And, of course, the premise of Little Athletics is that you do a whole lot of different events. And I never really knew. I was naturally good at sprinting and jumping and hurdling, but I just never knew at state championships and that you could only enter 3 events, and it was always a battle for me to decide which ones I would do. So I was drawn to quite a lot of different things, but I also played quite high-level netball and played basketball as well. So I could
really were spoiled for choice.
So I could throw, and so then learning when I got the opportunity then to throw a javelin, then I loved the javelin. And again, I think there's sort of a number of things. So that happened, and, you know, one of my brothers is 4 years older than me. I was always allowed to play with him and his friends because I could.
Yep.
And so I think that helped. And then that year, there was an Olympic Games on. And there was a program which is super, anyone that follows sport and Olympics would know, unbelievably groundbreaking series called Olympic Minutes.
Okay.
And they were filmed by a guy named Bud Greenspan, an American producer, and he was the official filmmaker for the Olympic Games for years and years and years. And his brother used to narrate these shows, and he would start off with, I can give you a little bit of a take on this. He would start off going, Herb Elliott, 1960 Rome Olympic Games, men's 1,500 metres. And then they would run through these amazing coloured stories that would be, 10 minutes to half an hour. Right. Well, that show was showing on a Monday night, and I was an 8-year-old girl or a 7-year-old girl allowed to stay up till 11 o'clock at night to watch that on a Monday night with my father. So I learnt about the Olympics. And I learnt about not just athletics, but I learnt about people like, Paavo Nurmi, who's an unbelievable Finnish distance runner. And
Paris
indeed,
Games,
yeah. And, Lasse Viren and Dawn Fraser and Herb Elliott and Clark and Landy, So I learnt about all these other people and the Olympics, and it kind of lit a little bit of a fire within me as well. So there was sort of those 3 things, the names of the houses, the Little Athletics thing, the carnival, and then this Olympic Minutes got me going. Yeah.
You move into your career. When you're in your prime, you were a big name in Australian sport and a really recognisable figure too. You had the big blonde hair, the steely gaze when you're out there competing. What did you love about high-level competition, or maybe even what do you miss most now that you're not a high-level athletic competitor?
I was very single-minded, and most people would say that when they saw me on the track. Although I laugh, one of my sons, he's seen a photograph of me with all that hair that I used to have, and he goes, when he was little, Mum, you look like Simba. Simba's the lion from The Lion King. I loved competing. I did, and I felt it was the mental challenge, the physical challenge, everything about it. I did an event where there were 7 different types of event, and I'm an eternally optimistic person, like ridiculously optimistic. And always I knew if something wasn't going well, something else would go well.
Yep.
You know, and I was a very hard worker, which I think, to tell you the truth, in athletics can be a disadvantage.
Okay. How
so I have a theory that you're better off being naturally lazy than a natural workhorse in athletics, because if you're a natural workhorse, you generally get hurt and injured. So I used to say, if I'm training and I'm not training well, then I want to keep training until I'm training well. And if I'm training well, I want to keep training because I'm training well. And inevitably doing 7 different events, the load was high. I don't think I trained harder than other athletes, but I had to train more, like longer hours, but to try and combine the 7 events of the heptathlon. So I think that was a really big challenge that my coach and I had to try and balance. And I wasn't very good at stopping. And in fact, the end of my heptathlon career came because I had made a judgment in a moment of rationality when I wasn't training, that if I was doing a session for my 800 metres and I ran the last 100 of any of the reps, I was doing slower than 18 seconds and I needed to stop the session because I would become technically bad. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, in the middle of a session, I did do that. And instead of stopping, I just dropped a rep and kept going. And that was when I finally hurt my Achilles, which ended my career, really. So it's kind of interesting to do that. And I think that that's where it's a coach being present at a training session is really important for someone who works really hard, because usually they're the only one that can give you permission. You won't give yourself that permission to take the session off. And I often recall I was at actually a post-competition where I was commentating, and I had a conversation with Rob De Castella, our legendary marathon runner, and he and I were talking around all sorts of other things we were doing in life. And at one point he said, people like us need to not do things like Everest or other such challenges because we don't listen to the signs, because we're so goal-driven.
Yes.
So I don't miss competing because that moment in my life was very intense. But I'm so glad that I did it, and I still love the feeling of running.
Do you reckon it set you up with lifelong sort of healthy habits as well?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. But the other thing that I know myself quite well is that I've realised I'm quite goal-driven. But now what I did after that intense decade or 15 years is I changed my goal to try and be more balanced.
Yep. Because
I know it's a healthier, mentally and physically, a healthier way to be. Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah.
I just wanted to talk about one might be a minor experience, but it sort of stood out to me. So you were an Olympian twice, you came 7th in Seoul in 1988 and then went to Barcelona in 1992. With all due respect to Cathy Freeman lighting the cauldron in Sydney, the opening ceremony moment for me is the lighting of the cauldron in Barcelona.
Oh, with the arrow?
With the arrow.
Yeah.
Were you there that night?
I was. No, I wasn't, because I had a stress fracture in my foot. I had a very interrupted lead up, and so we decided it was better for me not to be standing around on my legs for 4 or 5 hours. But I have to say those games were incredible.
Yeah.
And there is a real difference between hosting a games in a country, because I've now been to, I think, 10 Olympic Games and a Youth Olympics. But the difference is between hosting in a country that has a sporting culture to one that does not. And so I've been to, for example, Seoul I competed in, and it was fantastic and everything, but it didn't have that atmosphere. And then I got to Barcelona. I remember after I unfortunately didn't get to finish competing because I got hurt in my warm-up, but I remember going back to the stadium, and the men's decathlon was on, and in the discus and the hammer, the cage, the arms of the cage are movable, and they're supposed to be on a particular angle or have a certain amount of opening space for it to be legal. Okay, so one of the officials kept moving the cage, and then the decathlete who was in the circle would walk out of the circle and go and open the cage. And then the official would put it back, and it was this sort of toing and froing. But the crowd were booing the officials and they were cheering the athlete. And to me, that's such an unbelievable epitome of this nation that knew what was going on, and they were so vocal. And I guess the Spanish or the Mediterranean countries have this sense of passion about everything that they do.
Yeah.
So the Barcelona Olympics, because you think about the arrow, you think about
the song as well.
The song.
The tenors.
The tenors.
Amigos para siempre.
You know, and we were sitting at the closing ceremony waiting for it to start, and down came Placido Domingo to warm up at the piano. He was literally like 10 metres away.
Yeah.
And we were saying, if you know, the price that people pay and, you know, that organisations now charge for an opening ceremony ticket and the likes, and the same thing for Sydney. But I was saying to people, it will be the best concert, the best live show you have ever been to. Because we were there with Placido, with the three tenors.
Yeah.
You know, like how often do you get to see them, plus all the support acts?
Yeah.
You know, and it was the same when you think about the Sydney Olympic Games opening ceremony was just mind-blowingly good. From the moment that horse came charging into the stadium.
That was special.
With the lone rider, with the combination of Waltzing Matilda, you know, being played in the background, to the lawnmowers being pushed around, to the hills hoist, you know, like the whole thing was you know, tap dogs, tap it dancing en masse up and down the stadium, and the stadium was just rocking. And I think it is the greatest show you can ever go and see.
To switch gears and go to the slightly lesser games, the Commonwealth Games.
Yes.
That was where you had gold medal success.
Yeah.
Victoria famously pulled out of hosting the games, and a lot of people in athletics, people who had won medals at games and kind of gotten their start or their foothold in international competition at those games, feel really badly about that, and they're worried for the future of the Com Games. I mean, how important was it to you, to your career in your life?
I think just not me. I mean, I think back to those Commonwealth Games in Auckland. Guess who we saw for the first time there? Hayley Lewis, you know. And if you think back to all the Commonwealth Games, they are the breeding ground, certainly for the sports that are both common between Commonwealth Games and the Olympic Games. They are the breeding ground for our future champions. Who else's first games were those ones in Auckland? Kathy Freeman.
Kieran Perkins.
Perkins, yep. Yeah. Kathy Freeman. You know, it was probably almost Anna Mears too, I don't know. I'm just guessing. But they are absolutely the breeding ground because they seem reachable.
Yes.
When you're 18, 19, 20 and you're coming from being, you know, usually a rock star in your own small little pond as a junior, and you need to take the step up to seniors. And I recall speaking to my sports psychologist once, saying to him, I need to be able to walk around the warm-up track like I did when I was a junior, and I had this kick-ass attitude and I knew everyone was watching me warm up.
Yep.
But to take that from being a junior into being a senior is a big step, you know, mentally, and I think the way you carry yourself, having the experience and other things, and the Commonwealth Games really help provide that. So more than anything, I think that's of a concern to those sports that have relied on that to be that transition phase from being a very good, promising young athlete to making a career out of it. Now, I don't think sport is the be-all and end-all in life, but what I do think is that there is hardly anything that a country or a community that pulls together a community and brings that social fabric like sport does. We don't have religion anymore as a commonality, but we still have sport.
Yeah, the opiate of the masses.
There is, and there is this platform for sharing. And, you know, the Sydney Olympic Games was a magnificent example of that, not just those people that were in a stadium, but everybody at an Olympics talks to anyone because they've all got something in common for that period of time. And, you know, I was in Paris 6 months ago and my husband came over and someone asked him, you know, how were the Olympics? He said they were fantastic because everyone in an Olympic city is happy. You know, and I think these are the things in a modern world where we are disconnected in other ways, and social media tends to connect us and disconnect us in a real term, where sport plays this magnificent part. And I think the Commonwealth Games are another manner in which we can use that. And then when you think about it, and it's interesting, we're coming up to an election, and I think around the political understanding of the importance of sport. So to understand that it is the country's psyche that got changed and brought out of the depression by Phar Lap and the Bodyline series. And then you think around, everybody can recall what we were all doing when we won the America's Cup, and the Kathy Freeman race, and the Kieran Perkins, Dan Kowalski, 1,500 metres, and so these are the things that pull our country together, and to try and, especially in harsh economic times, to try and lift our psyche as a nation.
Yep.
I think there is such an unbelievable intangible value to sport, and that's why I think things like the Commonwealth Games are really important. And if I think around, without being too negative, around the Victorian economy and a whole series of other difficulties that Victoria have had after the lockdown periods and the likes, the Commonwealth Games could have been the perfect antidote to have tried to lift Victoria up another level in terms of the state's psyche.
Yep. Beyond sport, so we mentioned that you retired in 1997, that it can be really tough for a lot of athletes, not just ones who haven't made a name for themselves and have a bunch of gold medals to sort of rely on, but even those ones that have done nothing but win and win and win, but they've done it for half their life by the time they're giving up at around 30. What was that transition like for you? Did you go through any tough time?
I was so lucky. Can I just say, though, I think it's worse for the gold medalists, because one of the things that happens is, if you can imagine, when you're still trying to train and then there are so many demands on your time from media and sponsors and you're the hottest thing ever, and then you retire, first of all, you usually don't have any sort of career other than that, and there are only so many jobs, in inverted commas, you can do in media, that all of a sudden, first of all, your value drops. You don't get paid what you used to get paid. And secondly, you're not a hot property anymore.
Yeah.
So I think that's terribly difficult. And I managed a number of global Olympic superstars, and I had to try and explain that to them.
I was going to ask you about that, because you transitioned into management. And,
I did.
And these weren't small figures. You were managing Sebastian Coe and Michael Johnson.
Yeah, and Daley Thompson. Yeah. But you know what? It's because I knew Daley from our careers and things. And also the other thing I think I was good at, because I wasn't relying on the money. So I was making long-term decisions on their behalf, or trying to guide them that way. But I think, I was so lucky, first of all, that I did 7 events. I always studied or worked when I competed. And again, those that don't win gold medals still have to try and progress a career or work or study. So I think there's the difference in transition as well. And then I had an Achilles operation a month before the Atlanta Olympics in 96.
Yes.
So I actually got on the plane to go to Atlanta on a set of crutches to commentate. And I came home and decided that I would move out of Canberra. So I had been at the Institute of Sport for 11 and a half years, training for 7 events.
Right.
So very time consuming, training for 7 events, working part-time, studying. And then I moved to Sydney, and I decided that I would try and give 400-metre hurdles a go. So all of a sudden the balance had gone from 7 events to 1 event. Mm-hmm. So that gave me other time to do other things. And then the Sydney Olympic Games were the most perfect place. It was perfect for me to be there, because I had a whole lot of other commercial opportunities and opportunities full stop that those Olympics brought to me to allow that transition to be almost seamless. And I'm so grateful for that opportunity, because I have seen lots of other people struggle. And then I started, I had a sponsorship and marketing company and started managing people, and, I was super busy, and I was still in a world that I loved. So I was so lucky. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
In 2013, you helped with an initiative called Live Life, Get Active, offering free health, fitness and nutritional education online and in local parks.
Yeah.
That title reminds me so much of the 1980s Life Being campaign. You remember Norm?
Yes, I do.
Hello Toes and Munch and Crunch lunches. Do we need more of those kinds of initiatives or campaigns to combat things like childhood obesity? Like, how are we doing on that front?
Yeah. Well, so Live Life Get Active is a free community initiative. It still goes. I'm one of the directors. And one of a co-founder of the initiative. And at one point we were offering 70 different venues around, different locations around Australia, offering free exercise classes to anyone over the age of 18 on a week daily basis.
Amazing.
So yeah, and with more than 100,000 members and the likes. And my role really was to go and try and get councils to let us use their land for free to conduct the classes on, and also to try and help bring corporate partners and the likes into the organisation. And yes, I have a real interest in community health because I think that it is horrendously expensive, and we've always joked that we have the Department of Ill Health, not the Department of Health. Mm-hmm. And if we don't look at that, and I'm also on a federal government board that's to do with health, what's called a primary health network, and if we don't start talking more and acting more in terms of a preventative nature, the economic impact is just beyond horrendous. Mm. And it's funny, when we first launched 12 years ago, a number of people said to us, don't talk to the government about prevention. You need to talk about treatment.
Okay.
And I'm like going, oh my goodness. And now 12 years later, everyone's talking prevention, but we were kind of there 12 years ago. And I do think that it's still, the social media thing, the lack of incidental physical activity our communities have now, society, in fact worldwide almost has, is really playing out, and it will get worse and worse and worse unless we do something about it. So, I've come out before and said I think that every second class in school should be at a stand-up desk.
Okay.
And we should have drop-off zones a kilometre from the schools.
Oh, yeah.
And, we can do a whole lot of things with the built environment, with the way in which we build our world and structure our world, not just physically, but society-wise. What's popular amongst kids, what is the norm? Well, it used to be the norm, didn't it, to walk to school? Yep. So I have my husband and I have twin 16-year-old boys, and we make them walk to school.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
I just started making my 12-year-old son walk to school every day.
Yeah.
He loves it, and it's a 2-kilometre walk.
Yeah.
It's
our kids used to do the same from when they were 9, actually, and they would pick another couple of their friends up around the corner. Exactly. So we'd either walk, ride a scooter, a skateboard or a bike, and I'd run next to them with the dog. And actually, you think about the benefits, the physical benefits, but it's those social benefits, which is, I have to say, one of the magnificent things that COVID has delivered athletics is that finally people have started to understand what we all love.
Yeah, because we missed it in that period.
About running, and that's why run clubs have boomed.
Yeah.
We know that when you run regularly and exercise regularly with someone, you become really good friends with them because you have a whole series of incidental conversations. And different to swimming or riding a bike or rowing a boat, when you run, you can talk to someone.
Yep.
And so it's become this social connection.
What's that pressure-free side-by-side conversation too, isn't it? You don't have to be face-to-face. You're just jogging along.
And also, if you're doing it 4 or 5 times a week with someone, then you do talk about a whole series, actually at times intimate things that you don't even think are intimate.
Yep.
Only on looking back at those would you think that's the case. And that is what builds the fabric of a really good friendship. And so we're so excited at athletics to now talk around, that's why we've rebranded to Australian Athletics. We think this is a sport that Australians should own, that Australians connect with, that everybody's done at primary school or now at a run club, all the things we've known about it. And it's not just in a stadium and it's not just track and field, it's athletics. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Australian Athletics instead of Athletics Australia.
Yeah.
Didn't realise that.
Yeah.
So you were appointed president 18 months ago. What did you sort of see as the immediate things you wanted to address, or what have you been able to do, do you think, or get underway?
Yeah, I've been on the board for nearly 5 years now.
Yep,
and then
vice president for 4.
Yeah, and then president for the last 18 months. Last year we had two big goals, and one of them was to do the rebrand and to start to bring in, to almost change the definition of athletics. Like we like to say, if you've run, jumped, thrown, rolled or walk, then you're an athlete.
Yep.
So to try and broaden the definition of what people perceive our sport to be. And then, so we did that piece, which has gone super well, and then also to do a little bit of work with the digital stuff. But when I first came onto the board, the organisation needed some settling down, which is sort of was done. And then when I came in as president, now we are onward and upward. We have very big ambitions and big dreams and big visions, and we have a fantastic high performance group within our organisation, and it's being played out. I look back at some of the things that we've done in the last 10 years, and I think one of the instigators of all of this is we ran a coach mentoring program.
Sure.
And we've had this great group of coaches in our sport for 20, 30, 40 years, and all of a sudden they started helping out some of our younger coaches, and they are coaches that coach Eleanor Patterson and Nicola Olasguayas and Kelsey Lee Barber, and these coaches that were, really doyens of the sport had been previously either just continued on doing what they were doing or lost to the sport, and now they were back putting into these young coaches, and those coaches are now 10 years older and have had this enormous success and knowledge bank and everything, and we'll do the same thing with another group as well. So our sport is very coach driven, and I think that's been fantastic. We also have a philosophy, again, driven through our high performance department, which is around us getting the best performance on the day it counts.
Okay.
So there's no point you doing a huge, massive performance, almost to a degree, even at our domestic season.
Mm-hmm.
We want you to do that at the Olympic Games,
or
in
World
the final,
Juniors,
or at World Juniors on the day that counts. Yeah. And it's been really incredible to watch. We've gone from Tokyo Olympics, where I was sitting there commentating, to everyone in the commentary area from other countries going, wow, what's going on in Australia? And we keep seeing your guys in finals
we didn't medal,
things.
But there were a lot of finalists.
Oh,
well,
it was Peter Bowl, but Nicola medalled. So we did have some medalists, and then it went from that, and then if we kind of keep moving forward, then the next World Championships were really good. In Budapest, the same thing. People saying to me, what's going on in Australia? To the Olympic Games, where we won 7 medals, which is our best performance since 1956, where in 1956 it was a 6-lane track, and probably a third of the number of countries that compete than do now, to, our last year's Olympic Games, as I said, second best, and then a month after that, which was just incredible, our World Junior Championship team, where we finished second in the number of medals that we won, behind the USA.
Yeah,
14
finalists.
medalists, 28 finalists. Incredible. And then, we moved to the World Indoors that were last weekend, and 7 medals there, again, second in terms of the number of medals, behind the US, and the Sydney Marathon becoming a major, and Australian Athletics owns that event. And, the announcement that was made 3 weeks ago that Ulib Kipchoge, who's the greatest ever marathoner we've ever had, he's the man that ran under 2 hours, for those that aren't athletics fans, he's coming to run in Sydney.
Amazing.
And so at the moment I'm sort of going, here are the things you need to go and watch as a sports fan, as an Australian. First of all, if you get the chance to go and watch Ulib Kipchoge, that's like watching Usain Bolt run.
Absolutely it is.
Yeah.
And
then I'm going, and now we have this meet on, this Murray plant meet that's a sellout. That'll be
this Saturday,
it'll be the first time we've had a meet sellout for more than 2 decades. And Gout Gout's there. And I'm going, and my kids who don't really follow athletics, all of them and their mates know who Gout Gout is. I have people in the street his name is as such, but I sort of do this analysis between where we are now before Brisbane and where we were this time before Sydney.
Yep.
And Gout Gout is our Kathy Freeman. He's the star of the show, and I'm not putting pressure on him, but at the moment that's how it looks, and that was Kath.
There's an effect. I mean,
yes,
it's a little bit
is.
Like, it kind of reminds me of when Ben Simmons became the number 1 draft pick
in
the NBA. It was like people talked about the Ben Simmons effect on Australian basketball.
Absolutely.
Now there is the Gout Gout effect.
But also it's not even just Gout Gout. The support cast are amazing.
Yeah.
So Cam Myers, who's the world under 20 mile record holder, Torrie Lewis, who broke the Australian women's 100 metres. There's, and then we've got the ones that we already know, like Jess Hull and Matt Denny and, Jemima Montag and Nina Kennedy. And so this support cast is amazing. So we're further advanced than we were before Sydney, and we haven't had the investment yet.
Yeah.
So it's such we are, honestly, the momentum is just rolling for athletics at the moment. It's fantastic. And what we don't want to do is we will not waste this opportunity.
Yes. I wanted to talk about a couple of the curly sort of questions in world athletics right now. So first, recently Lord Coe vowed to doggedly protect the female category in world athletics, becoming the first sport to introduce DNA tests with little, I think it's cheek swabs or perhaps blood spots or something. Not just to sort of ensure trans women remain kind of banned from competing at the elite level, but also those difference of sex development or DSD individuals like the Olympic boxers who won in Paris. Where do you sit on this? Do you sort of applaud that measure? Do you think we need more study? Is it like the nuanced view where bans are really appropriate for the elite level of sport, but we should still be mindful of inclusion at grassroots level?
Look, I think it's quite a complex issue, and particularly for those DSD athletes. But the only thing that I would say is, first of all, that as Athletics Australia, we are governed by by World Athletics. So of course we will do whatever the rules are.
Yeah.
And what probably a lot of people don't know, and I certainly do, is that in 1988, when I went to my first Olympic Games, I had to do a buccal smear, so that what they're suggesting, which is the on side of the cheek, and we were issued a femininity certificate.
Okay.
So this has all happened in the past.
It's politicised now.
Yeah, it is, but it was. But, we were protecting the female category back then. Now, if you know the history of athletics, you remember there was a woman, a Polish woman named Stella, I can't remember her surname, in the 20s, I think it was, won the women's 100 metres, later on proven she was a man. So this has sort of been something that has challenged sport for years and years and years. I absolutely think the female category, personally, I think the female category needs to be protected. Every rule in sport is made to give a fair playing environment. Mm-hmm. And having elevated levels of testosterone in a human body does not give a fair playing field.
Okay.
So, and then I would also suggest that it is challenging because I believe everybody should have a place in sport. Everybody. But that doesn't mean they should have a place in women's sport.
Speaking of women's sport, and again of Coe, he was only recently rolled in the election for the IOC presidency by former Zimbabwean swimmer Kirsty Coventry. She's the first woman in the role, the first person from an African nation in the role, and the youngest ever leader of the IOC. What do you think her big challenges are going to be immediately stepping into it?
I think she has a massive responsibility. Like, the job is a full-on responsible role anyway.
Yep.
But because of those three things you just mentioned, her burden is enormous. So I hope and wish that she is very successful in the role so that it opens the door to more women, more African, more, younger people to do the same thing in the future. But that will depend on the success with which she performs that role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be tough. It'll be interesting.
It will be tough.
She's
because
41.
Yeah, and it will be tough because, first of all, global politics is at an unbelievably interesting time at the moment. So to deal with global politics, let alone dealing with all of the politics that come along with sport at that level.
Right. What happens in Los Angeles in 2028 if President Trump wants to keep certain countries out of the games, or if the IOC wants to keep Russia out of the games?
Well, I think the LA Games are going to be challenged.
Yeah.
And I said, I think they're going to be really challenged, not for the reasons that you've just alluded to, but nobody's really looked at it in terms of the impact that those Los Angeles fires are going to have on getting the games actually done.
Sure. Yeah.
So we know in Australia, from having lived through a lot of fires, that there are inevitable consequences to that. So one is there's a shortage of tradesmen, there's a increasing building costs, there, and in infrastructure costs, in everything that they'll need to do for those Los Angeles Olympics is now going to be so difficult and so expensive. And it's only 3 years away, and no one seems to be talking about that at all. And I'm like, I know they're refurbing a whole lot of stadiums, but it's really difficult. It'll be very difficult for the governor of California to be spending an enormous amount on Olympic venues when they don't have internet or clean water or sewerage or housing for a huge percentage of their population.
From the other side of the world, let's go back locally here for a second. One of the issues that I was really interested in last year, because I was writing a lot about running and reading a lot about running, was Olympic selection.
Yes.
Around the Lisa Waitman issue, where she felt she had qualified and wanted to appeal that decision and didn't ultimately end up being selected for the Olympics. And there are all sorts of different ways that selection could be done, just for listeners who aren't totally familiar with world athletics.
Yeah.
The USA, for instance, has a day of competition where you gotta win or come top three, or you don't get on the plane, and we do it differently. Are you happy with the way that selection works in Australia, considering any changes to the selection process?
Look, when I came into the position as president, one of the things that I said at the board is that, of course, we want to replicate the manner in which, as an organisation, the manner in which an athlete behaves, and we take expert advice and we listen to that, and it's about us getting the best performance we can out of the organisation. And so we have a range of experts around the table, around our boardroom table, that have a huge amount of knowledge that I have no idea about. So finance experts, people and culture, a whole series of different skill sets. So as an organisation, of course, we want to take on and learn. And if we ever think we can do selections better, of course we will adapt to that and take in feedback. But what I do want to say is that we have an independent selection committee. Their job is to apply the selection criteria that has been published. Every time we publish a selection criteria, we have an open forum for athletes to ask our chair of selectors any questions to clarify parts that they may be confused about or that they want more clarity on.
Yep.
Further, our current selection panel has more than 200 years, a combined total of more than 200 years experience in our sport.
Yes.
So they really have an enormous amount of expertise that they draw on, and they are from different aspects of athletics as well. So it's not just a distance runner or a track athlete or a thrower, or, it is a vast array of expertise and experience that they bring to the table. And I would suggest that that is always used in terms of applying the criteria that has been published.
Excellent. All right, just one more question then. It's a fun one.
Yeah.
The Maurie Plant meet is on Saturday night. There are so many of the aforementioned athletes that are going to be there competing, not to mention Letziel Tebogo.
I was about to say him, yeah. World Athlete of the Year last year.
World Athlete of the Year. I was in the Stade de France when he upset.
Noah
Was
Lyles.
it an upset, do you reckon?
No.
No.
So I'm not, you followed athletics and so have I. He won the sprint double twice as a world junior.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't have been shocked.
No.
But all eyes were kind of on Lyles.
Well, that's because of his antics.
Right.
And
sprinter. Yeah.
And I did laugh when I was talking to the CEO of World Athletics. I said, I don't know about sprint. I said, I couldn't watch it after 2 episodes. I said, all of that carry on by the Americans, because it's very un-Australian, of course, to do all that. He goes, we don't make it for you.
Well, you've got to have a bit of swagger. And
I know, and sprinters do. Yeah, they do. Although Letziel is not as much like that.
Yeah.
And the greatest thing, isn't it, about sport, and certainly is about athletics, is you win one week and you lose the next.
Yeah.
There's not many that win week in, week out. So it keeps you relatively humble. But I think the Maurie Plant meet, honestly, we're starting off with the women's 100 metres at 6:04 p.m. for those that are lucky enough to have got tickets. And that'll be a great race. But at 6:12, we have the men's 100 metres. And that is going to be a cracker of a race. So we've got, Lachlan Kennedy, who won the silver medal in the World Indoor 60s.
Yes.
He's only 21 years of age, which is young for a sprinter.
He's going to be great at nudging Gout Gout forward as well over the years because he's such a good starter.
Yeah.
And Gout isn't.
Well, and then Sebastian Sultana, who's still a teenager, and he won our senior nationals last year. Rowan Browning ran 10:12 2 weeks ago. So, and then Browning and Gout Gout are not in the 4x1 that just broke our national record.
Right.
So I looked up the times, and so if the time that the boys ran, or the men ran a couple of weeks ago when they broke that national record with 4 athletes in the team, so the 4x1, would have had them finish 5th at the Olympic Games. But the Olympic 4x1, the Americans got disqualified, which is not unusual. There were 2 teams that didn't finish or got disqualified. There was less than half a second between the 6 teams, but the first 5, and then another little bit to the 6th team. So I'm going, if we finish 5th and we've got no Gout Gout and no Rowan Browning in that, and that's with these other young men that haven't improved yet. Yeah. Seriously, if we get our changes right in LA, can you even, I can't even, it's so hard to even fathom that we could be in the run for a medal in the men's 4x1 at the Olympic Games, because you can imagine Gout running the back straight. Yeah. So here's a piece.
With a bit of a wind-up.
Well, here's a piece of information that most people don't know. You can see I'm getting very excited about this. Yeah. So there's been an analysis done on the last 100 metres of the top 200-metre runners of all time. Okay. Done. So how fast have they been?
After the turn, you mean?
Yeah. The last 100 metres. Gout's time in that company is 4th.
Wow. And he's 17.
And I'm like, that is crazy. Yeah. And so you put him down the back straight off a fly. Yeah. Okay. And then we know what Rowan can do, or one of those young boys, like their average age of those guys running the hundreds is under 25. Yeah. And, sprinters mature later. So we look at that with them, and then we've got this pool of women in the 100 metres as well. And every one of our relay teams at the World Juniors finished in the medals. 2 of them got disqualified, but that's the depth that we've got going at the moment. It's super exciting. And then you think about, there's a young kid most people don't know of, a boy named Mason Magrota. Yeah. Mason Magrota went to the World Indoor Championships in Lima, Peru last year. He's a good AFL player, so we're trying to keep him in athletics at the moment, which is good because Gout's helping with that, because I'll tell you about that in a minute. But he became the youngest ever World Junior medalist for us at the age of 15. Right. He won a medal in the long jump. That's like our juniors are under 20. Yeah. So he's literally 4 to 4.5 years younger than everybody else in the world at that age. Yeah. So, it's very, very exciting. But what I wanted to say to all those other sports that keep stealing our talent or targeting our talent, and I understand that Gout, there was a few of the football codes or a couple of the football codes trying to chase him as well. But we're like, the fact that he is, or the rumour that he has signed a deal with Adidas for $6 million, I'm going, that's way more than you're ever going to make playing NFL or AFL. And we have a home Olympics coming, and so our market is rising.
Well, I was going to ask you what event you were most excited by.
I don't know.
At the Moree plant, but I don't think you're going to be able to answer that.
No, and the men's 400, by the way, when you want to have a look at this World Athlete of the Year, Letziel Tobago. So just so you know, he won the 200, of course, and he's a 200 metre runner, but his personal best for the 400 is faster than our Australian record.
Wow, that's exciting.
And he's got the other 3 from the 4x4, which in Botswana, where they won the silver medal at the Olympic Games. The other 3 of his relay team are running in that 400 as well. So, we won't even know where to look. And the other person I should mention in all of this for the Moree Plant meet is that Matt Denny thinks he may break the Australian record. Wow. In the discus. Yeah. And Matt Denny won an Olympic medal. So that gives you an idea. And for the kids out there, he's going to throw nearly 70 metres. Now, you need to, at some point, go and stand out the front of your house, and if you've got a regular sized front yard or house width in Australia, he's probably he's throwing probably 4 houses long. Like, it's just crazy to think when you look. He's throwing a plate, a plate, your plate down a shopping aisle. Yeah, yeah, 4 or 5 houses down your street. Yeah.
Well, You've got a very big year in athletics ahead.
Yeah.
You've got a board meeting tomorrow. Thank you so much for coming in,
Yeah,
Jane.
that's
it was
okay.
lovely to chat to you.
And can I just say thank you for all your support for our sport? You know, it's really hard to get the sport out of your blood once you've got it in there. So thank you for your help.
I think it's interesting. We're going to have a great ride over the next decade or so.
We sure are.
That was Australian Athletics President Jane Flemming talking with Good Weekend senior writer Konrad Marshall on the latest Good Weekend Talks. Coming soon, we chat with Ellie Cole, the former Paralympic star broadcaster, and now children's book author. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe, rate and comment wherever you get your podcasts, and keep tuning in for more compelling conversations. Good Weekend Talks is brought to you by the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, proud newsrooms powered by subscriptions. To support independent journalism, search Subscribe Sydney Morning Herald or The Age. This episode of Good Weekend Talks is produced by Konrad Marshall and edited by Tim Mummery, with technical assistance from our executive producer, Tammy Mills. Tom McKendrick is head of audio, and Greg Callahan is the acting editor of Good Weekend.